Hi everyone, it's Laura Volpes, and today I am really excited to be a guest on the Altenew blog and YouTube channel and to show you this watercolor card that I created with the Cherished Memories stamp set. Before starting with the tutorial, I wanted to take a moment to actually show you the stamp set and the dies that I used today. This one here, as I said, is called Cherished Memories, and it's really beautiful with all that line detail, and it comes with a set of coordinating dies too. I paired the stamp set with the leaf frame cover die, which is a great die to add detail to your background, and I painted everything with my Altenew watercolors that you also see on screen. I went ahead and stamped the images on some Canson XL watercolor cardstock using some waterproof black ink, and then I started painting them with my Altenew watercolors. I am using the wet on wet technique, which means that before coming in with the pigments, I am first wetting the areas with some clean water. This way, the pigments will be able to move because of the presence of the water once I go in and start painting with my watercolors, and this will help me get a nice and smooth blend. For this first flower over here, I'm using the pink diamond, the puffy heart, and the purple wine colors. These are some nice and bright pinks. I actually mixed them in with a little bit of the frayed leaf watercolor. This is a green color, and because it's complementary to pink, it muted the colors down a little bit. At this point, I decided that I wanted to add a little bit of variation in my flowers, so I came in with a yellow that I created by mixing in the citrus burst and the fresh lemon colors in the 36 pan watercolor set by Altenew. I am adding that just to the very tip of the petals, and then I am coming back in with that pink diamond, which is the lightest shade, so that I am sure that the yellow is nicely blended in and I get a smooth transition with the pinks that I have laid down already. One thing that you might have noticed is that I am not painting adjacent petals one after the other, and that's because if I did, because of the water that would be present in the areas, the pigments would migrate between petals and I would lose control over the type of shading and blending that I get. As for the shading, I am adding my darkest colors at the base of the petals and anywhere I have two petals that overlap. To make sure that I have a smooth transition between the shades that I'm adding to each petal, I'm going to, as I said, first wet the petal with some water. I'm then going to go in with my pink diamond watercolor, which is the lighter shade, and I'm basically covering almost the entire petal with that paint. I'm then going to add the mid-tone color that in this case is the puffy heart color. I'm not going to extend that color all the way where I already have my lighter shade, so that I start creating some sort of a gradient on my petal. And lastly, I'm going to add some purple wine just at the very base of the petals, not extending that area too much. And as a last step, I'm coming in with the yellow at the tip of the petals to create that nice color variation there. I repeated the same steps to paint in the second flower, but in this case I used the colors Cotton Candy, Coral Berry, and Rubellite. The yellow that I used is a little bit more orange than the one that I have on the first flower, and I obtained it by mixing in fresh lemon and warm sunshine. I am not going to share with you the entire painting process for this flower too, because I think that at this point you got the basic concept of how I painted these flowers. But something that I did want to tell you is that because I wasn't liking the way the color palettes of the two flowers were looking next to each other, I decided to go in with a second layer of color over the first flower that I painted, And by using the paints that I have on the second flower, so the cotton candy, coral berry and rubellite, I was able to tone it down a little bit and basically give it a color that was a little bit more harmonious next to the other flower. I also added some extra shading with the cosmic berry that I added just at the very base of the petals on both flowers. And then I moved on and started painting the leaves. I'm using two different palettes for the leaves, so I'm going to end up with a bit more of a yellow-green and a bit more of a blue-green. And I did this to bring some more variation to the leaves too. For the more yellow-green, I'm using bamboo and forest glades, whereas for the blue-green, I am using emerald and bamboo. Once I was done painting in my images, I left them aside to dry and started working on the card base. I die cut some more watercolor cardstock using the leaf frame cover die, and I started painting that too, again with my Altenew watercolors. I used frayed leaf, forest glades and evergreen, and I'm keeping the darker colors towards the outside portion of the frame and keeping the inside part a little bit lighter, again to create more interest on the card background. I do love adding splatters and droplets to watercolor paintings because I think they bring a lot of movement and a lot of interest. So I did it for this card too. And I used the same greens that I have used for this panel. They're a little bit darker just because they are less diluted. For my background, I trimmed down some Canson XL watercolor cardstock to 4¼ by 5½ inches. And I'm quickly creating a gradient effect, again using evergreen, forest glades and frayed leaf. I first wetted the panel with some water and then went in with my paints. And then, once everything was dry, I used again those same green paints to create some droplets on this panel as well. I also went ahead and stamped my sentiment with some black ink over a panel of vanilla cardstock that I die cut with the leaf frame cover die. I took the rectangle that gets cut out of the center and I used that as a panel for my sentiment. And then at this stage I could actually go ahead and start assembling everything. I have here a top folding A2 card base cut at 5½ by 8½ inches and scored at 4¼ inches. And I adhered the background over the card base using a generous amount of double-sided adhesive. The double-sided adhesive will hold the panel down and will compensate for any warping that was created by the water. And in order to flatten down the panel, I also ran it through my die cutting machine, protecting it with some copy paper. I'm now going to adhere the leaf frame cover die cut using my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. The die cut is sized perfectly to cover the entire background, so the outmost perimeter of the die cut is 4¼ by 5½ inches. I adhered the sentiment panel, basically creating an inlay die cut effect with the leafy frame cover die, and then I went ahead and adhered the flowers to the bottom left corner of the sentiment panel, making sure to not cover the sentiment and to have a nice and balanced arrangement. When I create floral clusters like this one, I like to use liquid adhesive because it gives me a little bit of time to move things in place and get everything positioned exactly as I want. Whenever I create floral clusters like this one, I like to use liquid adhesive because I have a little bit of time to move things around before the glue dries, and this ensures that I get exactly the positioning that I want. And this is the final result. I really like how the flowers pop against the background, and I think that the leaf frame cover die added just the perfect amount of detail to my card base. And that's it for today. A big thank you to Altenew for having me as a guest on their YouTube channel and blog. and I hope I inspired you to create with the beautiful Cherished Memories stamp set and the leaf frame cover die. Thank you all so much for stopping by and have a great day.